It's another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Rubbin'minds. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obiuchendu. Thanks a lot for joining us. Another beautiful Sunday here. The past week was quite eventful, but I think the one thing that got a lot of people talking was the book launch of former head of state, General Ibrahim Babangida, and a lot of talking points, both from the things he's revealed in his book, his admission, of his mistake with June 12, and those who attended. And, the question about leadership and service and what that means for Nigerians and what we actually think leadership should be. We're going to be starting off the conversation today talking about, exploring our collective leadership in Nigeria, both as citizens and the government. And I'm joined here now by Sheyi Adisa, who's a lawyer. Thanks a lot for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Ibuka.
Yeah, so that's the book launch was quite a spectacle. Yes. And I think a lot of people were surprised. And I think the one word I kept seeing was whitewashing of his image. On the one hand, there was some good, if you want to say that he's finally admitted, that June 12 was an error. And I haven't read the book yet, so I don't know the other details in there, because I know he talked about some of the coups that happened. But a lot of Nigerians were not particularly excited at the attendance, and how much it seemed to sort of give him a pedestal, But he's a former leader, right? And it just brings up the question of leadership and, service, what that means, because that's the title of his book, talking about his service to Nigeria, With the way leadership is structured in this country, do you think we understand it? Or we just are used to whatever comes because of our long history of military rule and what it has done to our psyche?
So I think, yes, the long military rule has certainly affected how we see leadership. If you are a student of leadership, leadership is influence, leadership is service, leadership is taking responsibility. But I don't think the problem is the definition. I just think it's the fact that we have seen this as the model where the leader is served and not the one serving. And we see it not just in government, but across, with the organs at the top and all of those things. So I think, yes, there is an understanding of really what leadership should be like, which is service, but the model we see is sort of what is driving everybody else. And, people point fingers before they get there, and then they get there and they just sort of, get carried on with the same culture, with the same thing. You speak to people in different areas. It's almost like, when is my turn? When it's my turn, and then when it's their turn, they do exactly the same thing. So it's one thing to know what leadership is about. It's another thing to, have the courage and the discipline to really walk the line of service, the line of being fair, being equitable, the line of just saying that, look, as in this position, what I'm supposed to do is to empower people and not manipulate people. I bet most of the leaders know that, but the culture that they get into, they sort of just freely give themselves away rather than try and stop the trend.
I like the fact that you used that word culture, because that was actually my next question about, and it's one word that comes up a lot, the culture here in Nigeria. And we talk about, once in a while, you hear people say the system is the problem, There's almost a culture of idolizing the individual over the institution. People swear an oath or whatever to take office, but it's almost like the oath is to the person, not to the constitution or to the people. And it just makes me wonder, because culture is very deep in whatever way you look at it, whether it's your tribe, whether it's your religion, whether it's your systems. Once you use that word culture, it means it's ingrained.
Yes.
Is it something that we have to live with? Because I've always tried to find countries around the world where culture has changed and what they did, to get there.
Yes.
Are we in a point where we feel like the leadership culture here, or the culture of governance, where it's more about the person over the people, is going to live with us, and we'll have to find a way to work around it?
But that's the very nature why you need leadership. That's why you hear words like transformational leadership. The very fact that you allow yourself to be carried on with the culture means you're not leading, you're just following through with the culture, as it were. The need for leadership, if everything was good and there was, you might not need leadership. The reason you need leadership is to turn things around. The reason you need leadership is to solve problems. The reason you need leadership is to get to that worthy goal you're going to. So, what, if you like, the situation we're in is the time we need the the leadership the most. And what I mean by that is, yes, of course, the culture exists. We can't deny that. But the leader is the one that would understand that culture and then go in there with a new set of values. Every time you hear culture, culture is like the end result. So the starting point is always values. All right. So those values that one person starts with, he starts with a value, and that value after a while permeates his thoughts, his belief system, his emotions, and then he starts acting it out. Then after a while it becomes his behavior and his habits. And then this is how he is. Then somebody else sees it and joins him. And a third person sees it and joins him. And all of a sudden we say it's our culture. This is how we do things here. And that's why when you travel and you see how they do things other places, you queue up. But when you come back, and when this is how we do it here, then you do it like that. So the very point is there needs to be an introduction of new values. And who better to do that than a leader that has an understanding of the values that we need to bring change, selfless values and all of those things. Yes.
How do you find that person, though? And I ask that because, and it seems a very hard thing to pull off in a democracy, right? Military, communism, it's easy to be the one person. In China, you see that when we have the military, the guy dictates. In a democracy, it's much more than that. Right? So you have a president or a leader or a governor who decides to do certain things. We all hear these stories about how the civil service is a certain way in Nigeria, and no matter what you do, if the civil service does not work, you're wasting your time. So how do we?
I think you started answering the question. So so how you find the person is a different question. But when you do have the person, he now needs to start building the systems you were talking about. He needs to start, it's not about me, it's about the institution. He needs to start to strengthen the institution. He needs to take away the shine off me, that which we like in this part of the world. We like to celebrate the one man, where you should see the poster of a government, you see the poster of a governor. Where you should see the emblem of a state, you see the emblem of a governor. What are we doing? We are celebrating one man. You're not celebrating a government. It's subtle, but it's seeping into the minds and consciousness that where you describe a whole government as one man is a problem. And so what I'm saying is that you need a person that comes in and understands that we need to strengthen our institutions. We need to put those checks and balances in place. We need to give autonomy where we need to have autonomy. I was in the House of Assembly. If you don't have financial autonomy, it means the governor or the executive you're supposed to check, you have to go back to them to sign the file for you to come and check them. I mean, it makes a mockery of the system. So this is what I'm saying, that when you do find that person that has the right values, the next step is not to celebrate himself like an emperor. The next step is he needs to start to put powers, empower those systems, so that when he leaves, he would have built something substantial. That means restructuring, that means changing the way things are done. I think if you have a leader that is determined and has the willpower, he runs the risk of not making it because people that won't like it will attack him. But if he can do it, then you've started to lay the foundation for a new type of system, culture, or whatever you want to call it.
The one thing I hear a lot is, I think it's a saying about people are as good as their leaders or something along those lines. I don't know if I'm framing it correctly.
Yes.
And, when something happens and you see it on social media, you're like, well, this is why the government is this way or whatever it is, because people are a certain way. The responsibility of the citizens now and how that is a reflection of who we elect or what our government looks like, There probably was a culture in the past, of standing up to government. Over time, maybe through the military and, some democratic governments that have been quite forceful have made it a little harder for people to stand up for themselves and just sort of align, like you say, okay, this is where we do things. So what do citizens do? With regards to leadership, because people talk about the office of the citizen and how it's the most powerful one. Absolutely. But in a country like this where it doesn't really feel that way, how do you flip it?
So the power is always with the people. I think we must never make that mistake. If not, why do politicians run around for votes? Why do they bother? If they could just do everything by themselves, they won't bother about the people. And I think part of the gimmick is to make people actually feel helpless, to make people actually feel like you don't count. But the honest truth is that for every person, and the second thing I want to say, Buka, is that we always attribute leadership to only those in government. And I think that would be half of the whole story. In our families, in the private sector, in the public sector, in the social sector, they have leaders everywhere. You know, when you look at values, back in the day, if you brought a pen home that wasn't yours, you don't need a government to say, your parents will ask you, hey, that's not your pen, why did you bring it home? That's where it all starts from. Leadership in the home. You will have leadership in the community, in churches, in mosques, in all of these places. It sounded like over a period of time we all dropped it. It was almost like these values ain't working. What's the point of being this and being that? And we sort of dropped everything. And so that permeated the new culture that has come up, and this is what we're seeing now. And of course, the government didn't fall from heaven. The government came from here. So when you start having those values that have been changed, the people that start to get into government seem to be people too that their value systems have changed. So it's a collective thing. I would look at it as something one need to look at holistically. Yes, the government has a huge part to play, but the citizens have, you don't transmit all your rights and responsibilities after voting. You hold people accountable. You ask questions. How many can they arrest all of us? Can they jail all of us? But who is going to bail the cat? Who is going to be the one to ask those questions? That's why from the school system, it has to be a norm. It has to be a norm that secondary school students can ask their local government chairman, what's happening, sir? What can you tell us what's going on? And it needs to be commonplace. But how are we going to get that new value into the lives of people? The parents have to do it, the schools have to do it, media have to do it, the films we watch. It has to be a collective so that everybody knows I can ask questions. I can ask you to be transparent. I can ask you to be accountable. So the citizens cannot say, oh, it's a lost cause. There is nothing we can do. I don't agree. I sincerely believe that if we all take up this responsibility from the family to the school, to the churches, to the communities, and everybody starts this value system of transparency, accountability, rule of law, everybody is the same in the eyes of the law, and all of those values that we all talk about in private, and we start to live by them, then it's easier to hold government accountable. But once the people think the power is not with them, then they've lost it already. The power is always with the people.
I mean, I started this talking about, General Babangida and,
Yes.
His book launch. And I believe it's fair to criticize him. But I mean, you could also make the excuse he was a military leader, right?
Yeah.
And, that was how things worked under the military. He did things under fiat. There were decrees and all of that. We've been in democracy now for close to 30 years. It's about almost 3 decades now. And the arguments for the fact that, democracy hasn't necessarily done that much different. Yeah, there might be a few more freedoms here and there. But we still sort of see those subtle signs, and I'm trying to bring it to today now.
Sure.
Most people watch, for example, the National Assembly, when Mr. President walks in, and we hear this, on your mandate we shall stand, the song. And you're wondering, why is that being sung? Almost sort of like an ode to one person, right? We've seen institutions named after him. There was a barracks recently named after Mr. President. Signs like this makes you see, oh, I guess if I'm president, I can do things for myself, So I guess my question is, have we made any progress, you think, in sort of what leadership is seen as with what we see today?
So we are making progress, not as fast as we want. Now, what you see when you see maybe the National Assembly singing, first of all, he's not just the president. The National Assembly also has a majority of the people from the same party. So when we talk about governance, we cannot exclude politics. All right. Now, politics is what brings people into these positions. And so by reason of their political alliances, you will see such behaviors. You will see it. It's natural. He's the leader of the party. He's this. You will see that certain cheering of the leader. He's coming to our chamber. We should recognize him. I think those things are standard, generally speaking, because of the political side of things. But in terms of your question, have things changed? I think that when I look at how far we've come from 1999, even with little things like voting, using beavers. There are some things that were possible in 2011. They're not possible anymore now. There are some things that we could do freely then that were not exactly right, that you can't do anymore. So those things are little changes, and I've come over the years reading books that change. It doesn't, I mean, of course, depending on the leader you have may determine how fast. When you think about Singapore and all of these other countries, it was one leader that was not exactly democracy that moved it forward. But democracy has its own issues. It has the fact that it's a majority rule. It has those things are there, and those are the checks and balances that make democracy what it is. So since we have decided to go with democracy, we must understand that there will be progress, but it has to be checked. It probably won't run as fast as if you had a dictator in office where could wake up this morning and change everything. That's not a democracy.
But in a democracy as well, there's also willpower, right? I mean,
of course.
There's the argument that Nigeria cannot afford slow change. We are so far back on so many indices.
Yes.
And for whatever you think of President Trump now in the United States, most people around the world are wondering, he's changed the world order in 1 month.
Yes.
For good or bad.
Sure.
But it means in a democracy, you can actually decide to do things.
Yes, again, so this is why it's important that we understand. President Trump has that because he also has the majority of the Senate and the House of Reps. If he had a Senate or a House of Reps that was, the other party, the Democratic Party, he will struggle a little bit more. We've also seen kickbacks from the judiciary where judges are saying we would not execute your executive order. This is the nature of democracy. It's easier when you have the party support, which is the political side of things. It's easier. But the real way democracy has been set up is there will be checks and balances. One side will check the other, and those things just make things slower. But if you flip that and you have a dictator that is an evil dictator, then you don't want to be around that side. So every country must decide for itself which system of government should we use. We have people that have said, we don't want monarchies. But we've seen systems where monarchies work. We've had systems where they said, it's just democracy, and democracy has worked in the step.
We're almost running out of time, and I want to end with that question that you just brought up.
Sure.
Does the presidential system work for Nigeria? There's an argument for the parliamentary system. There's an argument for us trying other things.
Yes.
Besides the fact that this is too expensive.
Yes.
It's too top-heavy and too powerful. I mean, the office holds too much power. Yes. Do you think this is working?
I think what we need is a federal system that works. And what that means is a weak central and powerful states. I think that's what you need when you have a diverse community. You need each place to be able to run themselves in the way they want to run themselves. And the center just bringing us together for things like national security, customs, and things like that. But primarily, the parties need to be with the people themselves at the smaller unit, at the state level. That's what will work for us. That's what's worked for Canada and many other countries that have very diverse populations. So whether it's parliamentary or presidential, to me, is secondary. What is important that you have federating states that can govern themselves and a center that just brings us together when we need the power of numbers. And I think that's the system that's why we're called a federal republic, but in reality, we're not operating a federal system.
That's a very good note to end there, which is why the constitutional reforms keep coming up.
The restructuring.
People are very scared of that word restructuring. I was going to say, but I mean, it has to happen.
It has to happen. That's the only way. And it has started to happen. They've started taking things off the executive exclusive list into the concurrent list. That's why railway, electricity are now with the states. And I believe we'll see more of that as you go along.
We need that more than ever. Thanks a lot for joining us today. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Please stay with us.